Hello, this is Morel Bernard, and welcome back to Wuthering Heights. And by the way, please subscribe to the channel, and please share the videos. Last words were, I think, what malevolence you must have to wish to convince me that there is no happiness in the world. And that is from Isabella. Whether she would have got over this fancy if left to herself, or persevered in nursing it perpetually, I cannot say. She had little time to reflect. The day after, there was a justice meeting at the next town. My master was obliged to attend, and Mr. Heathcliff, aware of his absence, called rather earlier than usual. Catherine and Isabella were sitting in the library, on hostile terms, but silent. The latter alarmed at her recent indiscretion and the disclosure she had made of her secret feelings in a transient fit of passion. The former, on mature consideration, really offended with her companion, and if she laughed again at her pertness, inclined to make it no laughing matter to her. She did laugh as she saw Heathcliff pass the window. I was sweeping the hearth, and I noticed a mischievous smile on her lips. Isabella, absorbed in her meditations or a book, remained till the door opened, and it was too late to attempt an escape, which she would gladly have done had it been practicable. "Come in. That's right," exclaimed the mistress, gaily, pulling a chair to the fire. "Here are two people sadly in need of a third to thaw the ice between them, and you are the very one we should both of us choose. Heathcliff, I'm proud to show you, at last, somebody that does dote on you more than myself. I expect you to feel flattered. Nay, it's not Nelly. Don't look at her. My poor little sister-in-law is breaking her heart by mere contemplation of your physical and moral beauty. It lies in your own power to be Edgar's brother. No, Isabella, you shan't run off," she continued, arresting with feigned playfulness the confounded girl, who had risen indignantly. "We were quarrelling like cats about you, Heathcliff, and I was fairly beaten in the protestation of devotion and admiration. And moreover, I was informed that if I would but have the manners to stand aside, my rival, as she will have herself to be, would shoot a shaft into your soul that would fix you forever, and send my image into eternal oblivion." "Catherine," said Isabella, calling up her dignity and disdaining to struggle from the tight grasp that held her, "I thank you to adhere to the truth and not slander me, even in joke. Mr. Heathcliff, be kind enough to bid this friend of yours release me. She forgets that you and I are not intimate acquaintances, and what amuses her is painful to me beyond expression." As the guest answered nothing but took his seat, and looked thoroughly indifferent what sentiment she cherished concerning him, she turned and whispered an earnest appeal for liberty to her tormentor. "By no means," cried Mrs. Linton in answer. "I won't be named a dog in the manger again. You shall stay. Now then, Heathcliff, why don't you evince satisfaction at my pleasant news? Isabella swears that the love Edgar has for me is nothing to that she entertains for you. I'm sure she made some speech of this kind, did she not, Ellen? And she has fasted ever since the day before yesterday's walk, from sorrow and rage that I dispatched her out of your society under the idea of its being unacceptable." "I think you belie her," said Heathcliff, twisting his chair to face them. "She wishes to be out of my society now, at any rate." and he stared hard at the object of discourse, as one might do at a strange repulsive animal, a centipede from the Indies, for instance, which curiosity leads one to examine in spite of the aversion it raises. The poor thing couldn't bear that. She grew white and red in rapid succession, and while tears beaded her lashes, bent the strength of her small fingers to loosen the firm clutch of Catherine. And perceiving that as fast as she raised one finger off her arm, another closed down, and she could not remove the hold together, she began to make use of her nails, and their sharpness presently ornamented the detainers with crescents of red. "Oh, there's a tigress!" exclaimed Mrs. Linton, setting her free and shaking her hand with pain. "Begone, for God's sake, and hide your vixen face. How foolish to reveal those talents to him. Can't you fancy the conclusion he'll draw? Look, Heathcliff, they are instruments that will do execution. You must beware of your eyes." "I'd wrench them off her fingers if they ever menaced me," he answered brutally when the door had closed after her. "But what did you mean by teasing the creature in that manner, Cathy? You were not speaking the truth, were you?" "I assure you I was," she returned. "She's been dying for your sake several weeks and raving about you this morning and pouring forth her deluge of abuse, because I represented your failings in a plain light for the purpose of mitigating her adoration. But don't notice it further. I wish to punish her sauciness, that's all. I like her too well, my dear Heathcliff, to let you absolutely seize and devour her up." "And I like her too ill to attempt it," said he, "except in a very ghoulish fashion. You'd hear of odd things if I lived alone with that mawkish waxen face. The most ordinary would be painting on its white the colours of the rainbow, and turning the blue eyes black every day or two. They detestably resembles Linton's." "Delectably," observed Catherine. "They are dove's eyes angels." "She's her brother Hare, is she not?" he asked after a brief silence. "I should be sorry to think so," returned his companion. "Half a dozen nephews shall erase her title, please heaven. Abstract your mind from the subject at present. You are too prone to covet your neighbour's goods. Remember this neighbour's goods are mine." "If they were mine, they would be none the less that," said Heathcliff. "But though Isabella Linton may be silly, she's scarcely mad, and in short, we'll dismiss the matter as you advise." From their tongues they did dismiss it, and Catherine, probably from her thoughts. The other, I felt certain, recalled it often in the course of the evening. I saw him smile to himself, grin rather, and lapse into ominous musing whenever Mrs. Linton had occasion to be absent from the apartment. I determined to watch his movements. My heart invariably cleaved to the master's in preference to Catherine's side, with reason, I imagine, for he was kind and trustful and honourable, and she could not be called the opposite. Yet she seemed to allow herself such wide latitude that I had little faith in her principles and still less sympathy for her feelings. I wanted something to happen which might have the effect of freeing both Wuthering Heights and the Grange to Mr. Heathcliff, quietly, leaving us as we had been prior to his advent. His visits were a continual nightmare to me, and I suspect to my master also. His abode at the Heights was an oppression past explaining. I felt that God had forsaken the stray sheep there to its own wicked wanderings, and an evil beast prowled between it and the fold, waiting his time to spring and destroy. Sometimes, While meditating on these things in solitude, I've got up in a sudden terror and put on my bonnet to go see how all was at the farm. I persuaded my conscience that it was a duty to warn him how people talked regarding his ways, and then I recollected his confirmed bad habits and, hopeless of benefiting him, have flinched from re-entering the dismal house, doubting if I could bear to be taken at my word. One time I passed the old gate, going out of my way on a journey to Gimmerton. It was about the period that my narrative has reached. A bright, frosty afternoon, the ground bare, and the road hard and dry. I came to a stone where the highway branches off onto the moor at your left hand, a rough sand pillar with the letters W.H. cut on its north side. On the east, G, and on the southwest, T.G. It serves as a guidepost to the Grange, the heights and village. The sun shone yellow on its grey head, reminding me of summer, and I cannot say why, but all at once a gush of child's sensations flowed into my heart. Hindley and I held it a favourite spot 20 years before. I gazed long at the weather-worn block and, stooping down, perceived a hole near the bottom, still full of snail shells and pebbles, which we were fond of storing there with more perishable things, and as fresh as reality. It appeared that I beheld my early playmate seated on the withered turf, his dark, square head bent forward, and his little hand scooping out the earth with a piece of slate. "Poor Hindley," I exclaimed, involuntarily. I started. My bodily eye was cheated into a momentary belief that the child lifted its face and stared straight into mine. It vanished in a twinkling, but immediately I felt an irresistible yearning to be at the heights. Superstition urged me to comply with this impulse. Supposing he should be dead, I thought, or should die soon. Supposing it were a sign of death. The nearer I got to the house, the more agitated I grew, and on catching sight of it, I trembled in every limb. The apparition had outstripped me. It stood looking through the gate. That was my first idea on observing an elf-locked, brown-eyed boy setting his ruddy countenance against the bars. Further reflection suggested this must be Harrington. My Harrington, not altered greatly since I left them 10 months since. "God bless thee, darling," I cried, forgetting instantaneously my foolish fears. "Harrington, it's Nellie, Nellie, thy nurse." He retreated out of arm's length and picked up a large flint. "I'm come to see thy father, Harrington," I added, guessing from the action that Nellie, if she lived in his memory at all, was not recognised as one with me. He raised his missile to hurl it. I commenced a soothing speech, but could not stay his hand. The stone struck my bonnet, and then ensued from the stammering lips of the little fellow a string of curses, which, whether he comprehended them or not, were delivered with practised emphasis, and distorted his baby features into a shocking expression of malignity. You may be certain this grieved more than angered me. Fit to cry, I took an orange from my pocket and offered it to propitiate him. He hesitated, and then snatched it from my hold, as if he fancied I only intended to tempt and disappoint him. I showed another, keeping it out of his reach. "Who has taught you those fine words, my bairn?" I inquired. "The curate." Damn the curate in thee, give me that, he replied. Tell us where you got your lessons, and you shall have it, said I. Who's your master? Devil Daddy, was his answer. And what do you learn from Daddy? I continued. He jumped at the fruit. I raised it higher. What does he teach you? I asked. Naught, said he. But to keep out of his gate, Daddy cannot bide me, because I swear at him. Ah, and the devil teaches you to swear at Daddy, I observe. Nay, he drawled. Who then? Heathcliff. I asked if he liked Mr. Heathcliff. He answered again. Desiring to have his reasons for liking him, I could only gather the sentences. I'd note he pays back Dad what he gives to me. He curses Daddy for cursing me. He says I must do as I will. And the curate does not teach you to read and write then, I pursued. No, I was told the curate should have his tea dashed down his throat if he stepped over the threshold. Heathcliff had promised that. I put the orange in his hand and bade him tell his father that a woman called Nellie Dean was waiting to speak with him by the garden gate. He went up the walk and entered the house. But instead of Hindley, Heathcliff appeared on the doorstones. And I turned directly and ran down the road as hard as ever I could race, making no halt till I gained the guidepost and feeling as scared as if I had raised a goblin. This is not much connected with Miss Isabella's affair, except that it urged me to resolve further on mounting vigilant guard, and doing my utmost to check the spread of such bad influence at the Grange, even though I should wake a domestic storm by thwarting Mrs. Linton's pleasure. The next time Heathcliff came, my young lady chanced to be feeding some pigeons in the court. She had never spoken a word to her sister-in-law for 3 days, but she had likewise dropped her fretful complaining, and we found it a great comfort. Heathcliff had not the habit of bestowing a single unnecessary civility on Miss Linton. I knew. Now, as soon as he beheld her, his first precaution was to take a sweeping survey of the front house. I was standing by the kitchen window, but I drew out of sight. He then stepped across the pavement to her and said something. She seemed embarrassed and desirous of getting away. To prevent it, he laid his hand on her arm. She averted her face. He apparently put some question which she had no mind to answer. There was another rapid glance at the house, and supposing himself unseen, the scoundrel had the impudence to embrace her. Judas, traitor! I ejaculated. You are a hypocrite too, are you? A deliberate deceiver. Who is Nellie? Said Catherine's voice at the elbow. I had been over intent on watching the pair outside to mark her entrance. Oh, your worthless friend, I answered warmly. The sneaking rascal yonder. Ah, he has caught a glimpse of us. He's coming in. I wonder will he have the heart to find a plausible excuse for making love to Miss when he told you he hated her. Mrs. Linton saw Isabella tear herself free and run into the garden, and a minute after Heathcliff opened the door. I couldn't withhold giving some loose to my indignation, but Catherine angrily insisted on silence and threatened to order me out of the kitchen if I dared to be so presumptuous as to put my insolent tongue. To hear you, people might think you were the mistress, she cried. You aren't setting down in your right place. Heathcliff, what are you about? Raising the stir. I said you must let Isabella alone. I beg you will, unless you are tired of being received here and wish Linton to draw the bolts against you." "God forbid that he should try," answered the black villain. I detested him just then. God keep him meek and patient. Every day I grow madder after sending him to heaven. "Hush," said Catherine, shutting the inner door. "Don't vex me. Why have you disregarded my request? Did she come across you on purpose?" "What is it to you?" he growled. "I have a right to kiss her if she chooses, and you have no right to object. I am not your husband. You needn't be jealous of me." "I'm not jealous of you," replied the mistress. "I'm jealous for you. Clear your face. You shan't scowl at me. If you like Isabella, you shall marry her. But do you like her? Tell the truth, Heathcliff. There. You won't answer. I'm certain you don't." "And would Mr. Linton approve of his sister marrying that man?" I inquired. "Mr. Linton should approve," returned my lady decisively. "He might spare himself the trouble," said Heathcliff. "I could do as well without his approbation. And as you, Catherine, I have a mind to speak a few words now while we are at it. I want you to be aware that I know you have treated me infernally. Do you hear? And if you flatter yourself that I don't perceive it, you are a fool. And if you think I can be consoled by sweet words, you are an idiot. And if you fancy I suffer on revenge, I'll convince you of the contrary in a very little while. Meantime, thank you for telling me your sister-in-law's secret. I swear I'll make the most of it and stand you aside." "What new phase of his character is this?" exclaimed Mrs. Linton in amazement. "I've treated you infernally, and you'll take your revenge? How will you take it, ungrateful brute? How have I treated you infernally?" "I seek no revenge on you," replied Heathcliff, less vehemently. "That's not the plan. The tyrant grinds down his slaves and they don't turn against him. They crush those beneath them. You are welcome to torture me to death for your amusement. Only allow me to amuse myself a little in the same style, and refrain from insult as much as you are able. Having levelled my palace, don't erect a hovel and complacently admire your own charity in giving me that for a home. If I imagined you really wished me to marry Isabella, I'd cut my throat." "Oh, the evil is that I am not jealous, is it?" cried Catherine. "Well, I won't repeat my offer for wife. It is as bad as offering Satan a lost soul. Your bliss lies, like his, in inflicting misery. You prove it. Edgar is restored from the ill temper he gave way to at your coming. I begin to be secure and tranquil, and you, restless to know us at peace, appear resolving on existing a quarrel. Quarrel with Edgar, if you please, Heathcliff, and deceive his sister. You'll hit on exactly the most efficient method of revenging yourself on me." The conversation ceased. Mrs. Linton sat down by the fire, flushed and gloomy. The spirit which served her was growing intractable. She could neither lay nor control it. He stood on the hearth with folded arms, brooding on his evil thoughts. And in this position, I left them to seek the master, who was wondering what kept Catherine below so long. Join me. Join me for the next video of Wuthering Heights. Join me for the next video of Wuthering Heights. And by the way, please subscribe. Please share these videos. Join me for the next video of Wuthering Heights. Bye for now. Bye. Morale. Bye.